The voice was flat and devoid of inflection, yet somehow carried an inexplicable sense of oppression. I looked up and met the gaze of the man standing in front of the private room on the third floor. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, and from my angle, the reflection made it difficult to discern the expression in his eyes. However, I could sense that this man was observing me. Why was he here? Upon seeing this man, I felt a moment of panic and a complex emotion that I couldn't quite articulate. In my previous life, besides Sophia, there was another person who had reached out to me when I was in a dire situation. Unfortunately, I was like a possessed soul, repeatedly acting recklessly, until even he lost hope in me. Liam, the heir to the prestigious Gu family in the capital, a figure standing at the pinnacle of society, my little uncle. My voice was hoarse as I greeted him, though I called him little uncle. The actual familial relationship between us was convoluted, and hardly qualified as even a distant relative. My acquaintance with Liam began when I visited my aunt in the capital for a period of time as a child. During our first meeting, I was climbing a tree to get a bird's nest and accidentally fell, landing on Liam and dislocating his arm. I was terrified and couldn't stop crying. In the end, Liam helplessly patted my head and said, "It's me who's hurt, little girl. Why are you crying so much?" That was the beginning of our friendship. During my stay in the capital, I became Liam's little sidekick. He had a great personality and was gentle with me, and I enjoyed spending time with him. However, after the summer holidays ended, I returned to Heiken, and the Gu family moved next door, making us neighbors. I spent most of my time playing with Michael, and I didn't see Liam as often. Being in different cities, children forget easily, and I had new playmates. Later, as we grew up, I encountered Liam a few times at banquets. By then, I knew that the Gu family was a top-tier aristocracy that the Shu family could never match, and with Liam's status, I would always greet him respectfully as little uncle, but that was all. It was a surprise to see Liam here. Liam nodded slightly, his gaze briefly sweeping over Michael and Eva before turning to me, and inviting me to join him for lunch. The sudden invitation caught me off guard. In my previous life, although we encountered each other at banquets a few times, we had never sat down to eat together. Besides playing together for a while as children, we were strangers to each other. After speaking, Lu Yanwang glanced at the school principal beside him, and said in a casual tone, "It seems that the school's management needs some shuffling." With that, he turned and walked back into the private room, leaving the terrified principal and dean behind. Premature relationships were not uncommon, but today, they had the misfortune of being caught by this particular individual. Originally, early romance was not a big deal, and simply discouraging it would suffice. Besides, this being an elite school, arranged marriages among wealthy families were common, making early romance even more prevalent. However, with Mr. Lu's attitude just now, if this matter wasn't handled properly, the principal's position might be in jeopardy. The principal glanced down at the student who had just confessed. Wasn't that the young master of the Gu family? Didn't he used to be with the Miss Shu? Why did he suddenly confess to someone else? Why couldn't these young masters and ladies just give him a break? At the moment, I didn't have the heart to care about what the principal was thinking. I was torn between whether or not to go up to the meal that Liam had invited me to. Liam had spoken in front of so many people, and it might not be good if I didn't go. But if I did, thinking about the foolish things I did in my previous life, and Liam's eventual disappointment in me, I felt a twinge of guilt. After a moment of hesitation, I summoned up my courage and headed upstairs. Those foolish things were from my past life, I would never do them again in this life, so why should I feel guilty? I entered the private room, which was quite crowded. Besides the principal, there were also the dean and several directors. As soon as I pushed open the door, everyone's gaze fell on me. Liam's voice came from the front, "Come here and sit." I looked up and saw that the seat beside Liam was empty. Since I was already here, there was no use in panicking. I took a deep breath and walked over to sit beside Liam. Liam turned to the waiter and ordered a few more dishes. I looked at Liam with confusion and surprise. The dishes he just ordered were all my favorites. Was it a coincidence? Sensing my gaze, Liam looked up at me, and asked, "Is there anything else you want to eat?" I shook my head in a daze. There were already quite a few dishes on the table, and with the ones Liam had just ordered, it was more than enough. The principal and the directors looked at me curiously. They didn't know that Mr. Lu, the supervisor, knew the Miss Shu of this family. They had never heard of it before, and their attention didn't linger on me for long. They soon began discussing school matters. The waiter brought the dishes Liam had ordered, and though I was initially a bit constrained, after Liam filled my plate to the brim, I couldn't help but focus on satisfying my hunger first. As Liam lowered his head, he caught sight of my sparkling eyes fixed on the delicious food in front of me. My cheeks puffed out, and a fleeting smile appeared in his eyes. This girl's eating habits were still the same as when she was a child, just like a little hamster, quite adorable. In my previous life, it had been a long time since I had tasted such delicious food, and once I started, I couldn't stop. It wasn't that I was greedy, but in the time before my death in my previous life, I had to eat spoiled food every day, and sometimes I couldn't even get that. After such a long time, facing a table full of delicious food, especially with several dishes in front of me that are all my favorites, I found it hard to control my chopsticks. When I finally realized something was amiss, and noticed the eerie silence around me, I looked up only to find everyone at the table staring at me. Liam, sitting beside me, casually placed another piece of sweet and sour pork ribs in my bowl, and said with a touch of gentleness in his otherwise flat tone, "If you like it, have more." I turned to Liam. Despite his emotionless expression, I could detect a hint of warmth in his voice. I blinked gently, glancing at Liam and then at the sweet and sour pork ribs in my bowl. For a moment, I didn't move. Liam scanned the table before saying, "Let's eat first." It was then that the principal and the others came back to their senses and started eating. They didn't interact with Mr. Lu very often, but wasn't he rumored to be difficult to get along with? And when did Mr. Lu and this Miss Shu become so familiar? Why hadn't they heard about it before? After staring at the sweet and sour pork ribs in my bowl for a while, I picked it up with my chopsticks and took a bite. The sweet and sour pork ribs in the canteen were exquisitely made, surpassing many interstellar restaurants. But Liam was so gentle that it dissipated my lingering nervousness and anxiety, and before I knew it, I had overeaten. On the second floor canteen, Michael watched me go upstairs with a sour expression. He knew Liam, after all, they were in the same circle, and the Gu family was such a top-tier wealthy family, that everyone in this circle knew the heir apparent. But why was Liam here? Before this, she hadn't heard of any connection between the two, nor had I ever mentioned how Liam and I knew each other. Michael didn't have the mood to think more about it right now as Eva gently tugged on her sleeve. Turning around, he saw Va's anxious and fearful expression. Remembering that the principal and the dean were there just now, Michael held Va's hand and soothed her. "Don't be afraid, I am here." Early romance was quite common in elite schools, and many students even had arranged marriages since childhood, so the school tended to turn a blind eye to such matters. Eva met Michael's reassuring gaze, and her tension and anxiety gradually subsided, leaving her looking quite dependent on him. Eva didn't think much more about it. The feeling of being the center of attention and being protected was quite pleasant. He was quite satisfied with Michael, who was handsome, came from a good family, and most importantly, had fallen in love with her at first sight, which meant he would definitely dote on her in the future. Thinking about the wonderful life as a future CEO's wife, Ovi's lips curved upwards, and her mood improved. He squeezed Michael's hand back and whispered flirtatiously, "Ah Yan, I am hungry." Immediately, Michael ordered a table full of dishes for his beloved Eva, whose smile broadened even more. It was wonderful to be rich. In the afternoon, Michael and Eva were summoned to the dean's office. Michael didn't take it seriously as the son of the prestigious Gu family. The dean wouldn't dare offend him too much. However, he didn't expect the school to summon Ga's mother. As soon as they entered the dean's office, Michael saw Mrs. Gu sitting there with a grim expression. Michael and Eva walked in holding hands, and when Mrs. Gu received the school's call, she didn't believe it. After all, her son had always been close to Audrey. How could he suddenly be in a teenage romance with someone else? But now, Seeing her son walking in holding a girl's hand, her scrutinizing gaze immediately fell on Ava. Wearing faded jeans and a slightly worn-out white t-shirt, Ava's attire made it obvious that she came from a poor family, far from being comparable to her. Mrs. G's expression darkened further, and she stood up to slap Ava across the face. No one expected Mrs. Gu to suddenly attack, and Michael was too late to stop her. The slap left a red mark on Ava's cheek, stunning her. Ava bit her lip, covering her cheek with her hand, and looked up stubbornly at Mrs. Gu. Michael and I genuinely like each other. We're deeply in love. What's wrong with that? Ava thought that even if parents were domineering, every mother wanted a woman who loved her son deeply, and she was that woman. Ava's thoughts were simple. She was just an ordinary girl, who had never been exposed to wealthy families before. In this circle, the most important thing was to be well-matched, and so-called feelings were insignificant in the face of family backgrounds. Just as I happened to pass by the dean's office, and overheard Ava's declaration of invincible love, I found it amusing. I hoped their love would truly be invincible. Mrs. G's face grew even darker, and she raised her hand to slap Ava again. She intended to teach this little temptress, who dared to seduce her son, a lesson. Don't you see who you are? How dare you cling to our Gu family shamelessly? As Mrs. Gu cursed and swung her hand, this time it didn't land on Ava's face, but was intercepted by Michael. Mom, I like Ava. I'll marry her. She'll be your daughter-in-law someday. You'd better not be too harsh on her. As he spoke, his indifferent and supercilious attitude stunned Mrs. Gu, and even the dean beside her. The young master of the Gu family was actually in love. As far as he knew, Michael and Ava had only known each other for a day, yet they were already talking about marriage, and Michael had even defied his mother for Ava. This love-struck mindset was truly astonishing.